week, we talked to Dr. Charli Kemp about revolutionizing the education system and what we can all do to help make a real difference.
Hola, hola, buenos dias. Happy Monday, hopefully. Welcome to Carlie's Couch, episode 200, blah, blah. Do something.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Today we have one of my greatest friends on, Dr. Charli Kemp. So I'm going to introduce her first, and then we'll get into all the playful banter. So Dr. Charli Kemp currently serves as the Executive Director and Chief Revolutionary Officer at Change the Tune. Frustrated by systems of inequity that perpetuate negative narratives, Dr. Kemp combined her leadership and business skills to launch Change the Tune in 2017, in which she uses music and social impact to transform the negative social, cultural narratives that impact urban youth. Change the Tune currently has programs in Los Angeles, Chicago, and the Bahamas, like 5 years running. Dr. Kemp believes that music is the universal language of the soul and a panacea for societal problems. She is a curator of transformative musical learning experiences that empower individuals to create positive systemic change. Utilizing education as a vehicle for activism, Dr. Kemp is driven in her desire to end inequitable systems, to create opportunities and access for underserved communities. With Change the Tune, she seeks to reimagine the learning space by creating revolutionary extended learning spaces that provide radical and transformational learning experiences in partnership with the communities that they are in. She received her BA from Spelman College, her MBA from USC, fight on, and recently finished her doctorate, Dr. Kemp in the House, in Education Leadership at Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is a teaching fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Online Education Leadership Program and Doctor of Education Leadership Program. Dr. Kemp teaches a course on strategic leadership and equity alongside her Harvard fellow or her Harvard program chair, Dr. Irvin Scott. Whew, that's a mouthful, but I feel like the background is necessary. The accolades are necessary. So y'all know when she says something, there is a reason and a lot of experience and education behind those things. What's up, Dr. Kemp?
Whoa, I'm tired after reading that.
I'm glad she read it because I would have been like a panache on that one word. I was like,
how do you say that?
No, you said it right.
You said it right, but I would have been like a panache.
Yeah, I was thinking about
I don't know what that is.
You know, some people are like, you use those big words, and I'm like, what big words? And then you read my bio. I'm going to have to work on that.
No, but I think it makes sense. I think it's like colorful, and I think it's all pretty clear. I like the focus on culture and music and education, and I feel like that's something that we've seen over, well, it's probably been happening for the longest time, but as an adult now paying more attention, we start to see more of the importance of having to kind of meet students where they are, and the fact that a lot of traditional types of things are kind of wrapped in like respectability a little bit, which kind of gets away from kids actually being able to learn the way they need to learn. Or a way that really reflects what their world really looks like. So that's kind of what I got just out of Carlie reading your bio. So I'm like, that's exciting, and excited to hear more about it.
Yeah, I actually left out the most colorful thing. There was an entire paragraph on how music speaks to her soul and calms her. And there was actually 2 or 3 paragraphs that I cut out. But that she actually is also the best curator of playlists. So I'm actually going to commission Charli to do a playlist for us after this so people can also listen, because she has over 940 on Spotify.
Yeah.
Playlists? Or
Playlists. They're not all mine, but I would say probably 600 are mine. And then the others, I'm following folks and taking their stuff.
Okay. So I met Charli when I was interning here in Los Angeles, when I was in business school. And she was one of the people that made me realize, like, oh, I can actually live in LA. Like, people from LA are really dope. And I was working in South Central with a bunch of high schools and different things down there. And so, Charli, can you give a little bit of background in your in your work in education?
Yeah. So, I mean, part one, I like to start actually. I went to summer camp at USC, and then I did this summer camp till I became a camp counselor. So that's kind of where it started. So I was a camp counselor in National Youth Sports Program. And then through college, did lots of volunteers and teaching positions. And then I actually did Teach for America in New York City for 5 years. And so I tell people I never laughed nor cried more. Middle schoolers will bring you to your knees in one way or another, either making you laugh or making you cry. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. That's where I cut my chops. You know, teaching in the South Bronx and East Harlem are some of the most underserved communities in our country. And working with Black and brown youth and seeing how broken the system was, but also being able to like be revolutionary. Like I started with like playing Adele in the classroom. It was like right when Adele came out, and they were like, "What is this?" And then by the end, they were like, "Can you play Cold Shoulder again? How about Chasing Pavements?" And I'm like, and it just created a connection with the youth. And so even though I was a pretty disciplinarian teacher, it like allowed me to like figure out music is a bond. Like I can make these kids do the things, or not make these kids. I can work with the kids in doing the things if I have the right tools, music being one of them. You put a little Drake on and they like doing the math problems. I was, doing the math teacher, and I thought about myself, like what I liked. And so trying to connect what I like and what they like, that was a big piece. And then from there, one of the things I say is I've been all over the education space. Private schools, public schools. I started off in private school as a kid, and then I went to public school, and that was a shocker. And so, but from Harvard to Spelman to teaching in the hood and growing up in the hood and going to schools in the hood, like I've been all over. And then I'll just say, after teaching, I worked for Green Dot Public Schools. And so 5 years doing that, it was leaving, everybody's like, charter district, it's all broken. Let me just be clear on that. And it's like, if any of you have read, a lot of people have heard me say Animal Farm. The system replicates its brokenness. So we say that we're going to be different, and we look up and we're just the same thing. And so Green Dot, I first did finance and operations for them. And so I was working in partnership with LAUSD around the facilities, around the school nutrition program. Who knew we use the same vendors that prisons use at times? So, when we think about we are what we eat and what we're putting in our body, and like, can kids be successful? And they're not eating the food, so they can't be successful because they're hungry. I remember I had this kid, he was like bouncing off the wall, like up and down. And we found out the next year when they took the time to stop, he was hyperglycemic, and like his blood sugar wasn't regulated. But how many kids are popping hot Cheetos and these things? And so Green Dot did that, and I saw the back end operations, and then I had the chance to do social emotional learning, which is where we really got to connect because we got to build out our summer camp. And I came up with the idea for Change the Tune, and that's like allowed me to like pilot entrepreneurially what it looked like. But when you talked about respectability politics and like how our system is structured, where we only care about like math and English and writing, which are important things in a way, but like what's important is how they're used, not necessarily can a kid perform on a test. And that's the problem. And so that was a roundabout way of, I've been all over the system, and it's and even at Harvard, like I tell people, it has been the most amazing experience. And it's also originally known as the corporation. Like it was based off the back of slaves. Like when we think about who the first Native American who the land is stolen from, when they got to go there. And so like it's the system's replicating itself, and it's time for it to stop. It's time to like disrupt some things.
Okay, so I had like 30 questions from that. But I'm gonna reel it down right now, I guess, to you mentioned a couple of things, looking at diet and the food in the school system, being able to make sure we keep like the arts and cultures in schools, which I know a lot of schools are cutting art and music programs as well. In what ways, if we just had to kind of straightforward kind of list some of them out, in what ways would you say the education system is broken? I mean, even if it's just like in these areas, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just like everything's just messed up, but
she got the data to articulate that, so
yeah.
I mean, I'll try to be brief in this because that last answer was really long, and I want y'all to stay engaged. But part one, I want you to know this number. I want 6,000 hours, and I'm a 6,000 hour gap. How do we get there? Kids spend 80% of their waking hours outside of school. And if you were a parent at home in the pandemic, you realize like that 20% matters. But 80%. The upper income spend 9 times the amount of the low income on outside of school activities. So by the 6th grade, there is a 6,000 hour gap between upper income children and lower income children. I'm a math teacher, so I'm going to break it down for you a little further. It's 1,500 hours in a school year. So 1,500 times 4 is 6,000. So we're talking 4 school year difference by the 6th grade. That's like half of elementary that they are ahead, or like there's the gap. And so what I tell people is, when you think about schools and education, you think about 8 to 3, September to June, but we could make those perfect utopias and we wouldn't touch this gap. And that's part of the first broken piece, is that the wealthy understand that learning doesn't stop at 3. It doesn't stop at that school building. Learning is a lifelong journey everywhere. In this moment, we're learning from each other. And so that's the first piece of the brokenness, is we think that learning has to happen in the confines of a space and place from a dictated way.
Can we talk about that first real quick? Okay, so the first thing that made me think about was when I was in grad school, I stayed with this family, and I got to stay there for free. Thank you. I was down in the bottom level, but they had like 4 kids, and they were a wealthy family. They were like, "Hey, you can just stay here can you help us like get the kids to lacrosse sometimes?" I was like, "Sure," but I was like, these parents ran their kids like they were their managers. Like, they had no time. I almost kind of felt bad because it's like they went to school, they went to lacrosse, then they had the tutor, then they did this, then they went to that. And it's like they literally were doing homework at like 9:30 p.m. and then go to bed. And I was like, I've never seen anybody do the most like that. And yet I feel like that's what you mean when it's like, okay, we're going to make sure you're doing things. And they're socializing more, and they're experiencing a lot of other things, all of which cost money, and all of which involve parent involvement that you can't always have when your parents are working or, have more responsibility. But then I also think about...
Just stop right there. Think how much money that family spent. Thousands. And if you're an underserved family who's maybe making $2,000 or $3,000, like, you're just trying to pay the rent. You don't have all that money to put your kids in all those places.
We was doing the most just being able, like, I know for us, they always wanted to have one activity. So, like, I did dance for a while. My brother went to karate class or whatever. And so now thinking about it, it's like, man, I don't even know how much that stuff is. But there's a lot of things we didn't do because, how's that going to work out? So I also think about, though, how I am fortunate to have parents so I was also homeschooled for 3 years, but I have parents who, everything we did was like a learning experience. And so I kind of grew up as a nerd because I was like reading encyclopedias for fun because I like enjoyed learning. And everything was like a field trip, and, we were always doing things. And I feel like that's one of the things I appreciated most, is that they at least instilled me wanting to learn and wanting to read and explore and all of those things, which again, I see can be tough for families and kids where maybe they don't see their parents as much. Maybe they're more influenced by the environment and the people around them. And it's like, that's kind of whack. Why are you doing that kind of stuff? And there's a lot of factors there. But whose responsibility can that be? Should that be the school system, the education system's responsibility to help with those hours? Or is that a life like inequity thing?
Beautiful question. I think one of the powers of what you guys talk about is this holistic nature and community and collective. And it's, the old saying when we were growing up, people would be like, it takes a village to raise a child. It's the village. It's us. It's schools. It's politicians. It's businesses. It's everybody's responsibility, really, to be quite frank about it. I would say it starts as a school, at the school, in our governmental system. Like right now, another fact, like probably 80 to 90% of the funds in the learning space goes towards the school day. But if kids are spending 80% of their time after school, we need to be shifting our how much do we spend on defense? Last time we had a fight. If we stop poking at people, we're going left. But the point is like, could we invest some more money in the education space? What are some ways businesses, Fortune 500 companies, if we got them to give 5% to the education space just for after school, and we love to say there's not enough talent. So let's say we decide everybody needs to invest in this talent pipeline. That would be probably like 50, 60 billion at least to go to the space. And so if you are a person and you're working at work, like, could you volunteer once a week, even once a month, to create some level of consistency? It's really the collective should be thinking about what ways, if we want to have a better world, how can we all get involved? Because education is the profession that creates all other professions. Education is what socializes us. Education is where it all starts.
And they don't get no respect. No money, no respect. But also to say that it's like a collective thing, I think that's one of the main issues with the country in general, is that we're such an individualistic country and such a country run on dollars that we don't have that sense of community outside of certain, maybe like our neighborhood and things like that, and our church or whatever. There are sub communities where we do feel like that, right? Where I know, again, going back to my family, it's always been hey, if you see my daughter, feel free to pop her hand. Like, everybody look out for everybody, and we're making sure we're good. But in general, we don't care about that. So
you just said
how can anything happen?
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you just said the second, like, that's my, like, part one, I go into the numbers. Part two, I go into the individualism side. That is the piece that's broken in the education system. So you guys familiar?
That's like why nothing moves forward though here. So it's like it sounds like a thing where it's like, do we have to write our congressman, or like how do you get people to care about a thing unless you're affecting dollars in some way?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one thing I'll name, everybody's up in arms about SEL, but we're teaching kids to care and care about things. So they out here protesting.
Social emotional
learning, yeah. So kids are out here protesting because they learned how to care about the things in others. And so their parents don't like that because they're in their parents' ear like, yeah, this privilege is not cool.
You saw those white people talking about, like, why are we teaching empathy in the classroom? Like, do y'all hear yourself sometimes? It's like, But if you had reframed the question, or if you were acting like empathy for a different type of thing, or like, even saying it differently, they would answer differently. It's like people are just too scared. Just be bold and say, I don't want them learning about this black people. I don't want them learning about what white people did. I don't want them to learn certain things. Like, just be straight up about it, because like, it just blows my mind how much things don't make sense, or how people think they make sense, and it just doesn't. That's so frustrating. And then they'll have all the power to do whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
I was about to say, so another thing on that people are always up in arms about is Charlie talked about holistic health and wellness, and on the Bouch, we talk about that a lot, like, mindfulness and things like that. I'm from Oklahoma. I went to a private school and a public school, and I teach yoga and mindfulness and social emotional learning to kids, and have, for quite a while, and also teachers and administrators on how to put that into their curriculum, because we are well-rounded people. We all have emotions and thoughts and need tools in our toolkit to learn to deal with them. One of my teachers, who was my first and third grade teacher, went on a whole Facebook rant and was talking about how meditation was the devil, and how she can't believe that they're making, how is it, supposed to be separation of church and state. Girl, you work at a Christian school anyways, but like saying it's the devil and all this stuff. And I was just like, yo, I teach it. If you ever have questions, like, it is non-religious. You could actually focus on Jesus if you want to. You could make it that. But I think that is also part of this. You were going into something else about the individualistic systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think to this point of, and connecting to that, is like such a lack of knowledge. So.
And you're a teacher. I'm sorry.
Yeah, bro. Come on. And she taught me.
Why you don't know how to look up things and research?
Bro. But then those people teach us. Those are the people that have been teaching us our whole lives.
But we over here get mad. But I'm gonna let you talk again, Dr. Kemp. But also, when you look back at it, and you're like, especially your elementary years, you're like, oh, these folks were like 21, 22. And I don't think about me. Like, I might have been more closed-minded or whatever about certain things at that time too. But I don't know, bro. You shouldn't be no teacher being closed-minded like that. But I guess we need a teacher.
Ain't no excuse. Mine were older, but they're still set in their racist, closed-minded ways.
It's a challenge, I think. So this piece I want to break down first in terms of, and I think this is part of how teachers are not educated. So teachers haven't been educated, just like our kids haven't been educated. And so coming full circle to that is what I would say is, so there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is meaning like at the base, you got to have like your hunger needs met and your safety needs met, and then your love and belonging, all these things, all for the goal of self-actualization or success. Everybody wants to be successful. Q Dre, I just want to be I, not we, not the collective. And so that's the broken piece, is a few things. One, all of those layers. 1 in 4 children come to school hungry. 2, we think about bullying and how teachers act and start calling something they don't even know the devil. And so how are you creating a space of love and belonging for all? 3, 90% of the teaching forces. So I can just go on and on. How are we supposed to get to self-actualization and success when that whole system hasn't been set up? But the other piece, shifting, Maslow spent 6 weeks. Everybody hear this. Maslow spent 6 weeks with the Blackfoot Nation. And they had what do you call a TP? And in their TP, it was self-actualization is at the bottom. It's then community actualization in cultural perpetuity. So we wonder why our earth is dying right now. The individuals in the eyes are considering this success when really, no, it's about community and cultural perpetuity so we can continue going on. And so they realize that it's not about the self. There's an African proverb, I am because we are. We can't be if we aren't each collectively together thinking about each of us. And then one more piece, I wish I had my visuals for you. I have a whole slide deck, but there's another indigenous model called the medicine wheel holistic model. And this is in many BIPOC communities, but it's the idea that it's multiplicity. It's that it's not food first, it's not love and belonging first. It's you need all of these at the same time to be able to push forward. Like if you think about who do you guys think are great leaders? Name 2 people. Okay, we'll say you 2 as leaders. Okay. But for you to get to the place where you've been, it hasn't been just let me work on math and science, or let me just feed myself well, or let me just mindfulness and pray. It's the collection. It is the collective activity. And so when we're designing learning spaces, first of all, not everyone learns the same way because they have different things they need. And 2, it should be centered on what is good for the whole child and the whole community. It's an and world, which also we can go down the scarcity mindset and path. But the big point I want to make is that you made and amplify is that we are too individualistic. What would a world look like? And I'm going to bring us to change the tune. One of our big things we do with kids is we teach them about the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And those goals are like 17 goals of what's wrong with the world. Zero poverty. The goal is to have zero poverty, zero hunger, eradicate the climate issues that we have, the issues we have with animal extinction. And so what would it look like if we centered our learning on not just ourselves, but actually our communities and our collectives and what it takes for us and the collective to be better? So that's the part of the biggest problem is we are centered on things that don't matter.
But I remember in 4th grade being obsessed with recycling because we were learning about the hole in the ozone layer. That joint probably don't even exist anymore. If it ever did, I don't know.
It's getting worse. My skin is real dry right now.
So I feel that it may be more and more of those types of things being learned or taught or put into children's minds to think more about this bigger whole. But I remember we learned some of that stuff too. But then it's I feel we get to a point because everything is so broken that then that doesn't matter anymore. You know what I mean? You can care, you can want the best for everybody and care about those things until you feel you realize there is no support for those things, or until you feel you can't really make a difference there, and or trying to work in that space doesn't help you feed yourself, or all the other things that have to go into it.
It can feel like that at times. I won't lie. I mean, even doing Change the Tune and a movement and whatnot, it feels people don't care enough about education, or there are so many competing issues in this world. Why continue? But I think that's also part of what they want you to think. I don't know if you guys ever watched DJ Khaled on the Snap, but he's they don't want you to know these things, that we have infinite power, and that when we unite, it's Go-Go Power Rangers or the Justice League. Our team the other day was naming each other. I'm apparently Nick Fury. But the point that I'm making is that, no, I think they want us, it's kind of like the divide and conquer. They want you to feel alone. They want you to feel. But this here is community. And when the community starts doing things, we see changes. And we have seen some changes. I think whatever your politics are, I think Barack Obama being a black man president, that's a huge change that we've seen. We've seen some shifts in this world where even Change the Tune, our kids, we have kids, we say, what did you learn this summer? And they're I've learned to think bigger. Or kids have actually started their businesses and begun to actually make some money. We had one kid during the pandemic, she took her mom's stipend and used it for feminine products for those in a homeless community based off the project she did in the summer. And so change is happening. I think we are also conditioned to look for negative things instead of finding the positive and amplifying that, because then that's when we get that avalanche of positivity going.
Well, we don't really get clicks on positive stories unless they're the stories where it's wow, look at this kid who walks 20 miles to school every day, and that's not actually a positive thing. So and which also still to me goes back to the human condition of like, okay, let me see what's the drama and the messiness and all that, right? But to your point, I think it is like it's what you look for. It's what you care about. It's what you choose to amplify. I wish there was just a way to like sprinkle some dust on everybody, get them on the same page. You know, just about caring about people.
I would say, like, this morning I saw this video. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Because of Them is a page on Instagram. Mm-hmm. They got probably millions, and it's this kid who just got into Harvard. And in the first piece, it's like, no to Princeton, no to Yale, and the mom. I love the mom. She's like manifesting it, and she's like, we gonna get what we looking for. And then he opens Harvard and they go nuts. Mm-hmm. And apparently he got into Brown and somewhere else as well. And like people are sharing that and we're seeing it. Perhaps it's the algorithm. I mean, we do know social media is a little jacked. So we have, again, I wonder how much they're trying to control our narrative to make us think that people don't care about these things to like replicate that.
Well, we knew that from the elections too, like back on Trump's like first thing, they were showing like how drastic the different Facebook pages were and things. But also I'll say algorithms also show you more of what, because I do think there is something behind the scenes, but they also show you more of what you're looking for. So if you're looking up messy stuff and drama, you're going to do that. So I think something important is if you do feel hopeless or like things can't be fixed or like, woe is me or what the hell is going on, whatever, to kind of set your life up in a way where you're looking for something positive. Like I follow a bunch of positive pages and things like that. And so I actually feel sometimes refreshed, more so on TikTok than other platforms, but it kind of is like whatever you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think to amplify, I mean, I got Octavia Rahim and the Nap Ministry. So my page, maybe that's what's happening. I will say, though, I was at a conference last year, and social media is highly broken and highly problematic. So what I learned is there's a class out of Stanford where a lot of these platforms were designed, and they basically studied the psychology of addiction, and they've used that for social media. So that said, like, and they've also talked about how like the bots and different things are taking over the social media piece. So definitely, I think, I mean, we're going down a whole thing, but I would say that like we can't rely on like the way social media is constructed. I mean, what's the guy's name who's running Twitter?
Oh, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the education system being broken. So we talked about individualism. What was the other really big point that you had?
The numbers and the way that it, and one other piece I want to say, it's not just, rich and poor. Non-white school districts get about $2,200 less per pupil, or don't quote me on it, but it's like $23 billion. And so it's a race thing too. We know that race is tied to economics. And so like the system as itself was never designed for all. And these are just some of the pieces. One, the individualistic, the model and the way in which we do it, and how it's steeped in Eurocentricity and oppression. And then the second piece is really even just the number structure of how it's set up.
I had an acquaintance who worked with the Department of Justice, and I was kind of blown away. This is actually probably 10 years ago now, maybe more, that we had talked about this, but I was blown away by the fact that he would be traveling to like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, because there are like lawsuits against schools, or like there are literally like schools who are not letting certain people in, or they are like holding money from certain schools and all kinds of things where it's like it's really like just as cut and dry as you just said. Like it sounds like it's one of those things where it's like, black people always want to be a victim and things like that. But it's like, no, they're literally look at this school and look at this school. And parents, I remember it was something about suing a school because parents didn't want certain kids to transfer to be on the football team because then they would start winning if they had the black people on their team, and like all kind of stupid stuff. And it's just like so unfortunate. And then you look at the numbers of where some of those states rank in education, which is the very bottom. And how can those things change? Like, so let's kind of talk about maybe on a bigger scale, how can some of those things change, you think? Is it political?
1 second. So Charlie, what's your quote about systems?
Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets.
And so with that being true, that these were being designed to keep people out, to keep people down, to oppress people in these broken ideologies, like, can it even be fixed, or is it something that just needs to be completely abolished and like restarted?
I'm on the blow it all up train. I'll say that. Like, some people don't love that. I hear people cringe on, blow it all up. Yeah, blow
what
that
does that
shit
look
up.
like?
Blow the shit up. I don't know if we can curse, but
Yeah,
blow
you
it
can.
up.
You sure can.
What it looks like is, I think one analogy that I love to give is actually Tyler Perry. However, but here's what Tyler Perry said. He said, while everybody was clamoring for a seat at the table in Hollywood, I went to Atlanta and built my own. Atlanta, he has $1 billion industry over in Atlanta. Now, there's a danger always, because how much are you replicating the same system even in Atlanta? So I just have to name that. But at the same time, too, he wasn't clamoring to do what they did, and he still has his own separate system structure. And so I think using that as a metaphor, in a sense, I think that's why I'm focused on after school and summer. No one's like testing after school and summer, which is part of the biggest brokenness, is the accountability system is broken. If like what your metrics are or how you collect evidence is broken, then that's going to, like the reason why people don't put money into after school and summer, again, is because we're not testing, and these things it's like all of a cycle. So I think one, even if it's not after school or summer, I think, you mentioned you were homeschooled. There's unschooling schools where families are starting to get together and create pods. But I think creating alternative learning spaces where children can get all of the things that they need, whether that is a summer camp, an after-school camp, a spring break camp, a winter camp, and thinking holistically, like, what are we feeding these children? How are we, where Carlie and I linked up is mindfulness and yoga. They start giggling when they start, and now they're like, well, can we do this pose, or can we do that pose? Or during the pandemic, one of my favorite stories was one of our learners reached out to her and was like, this pandemic is hard, but you taught us how to breathe. And so I think, imagine every kid, which there's more than 25 million without access to after school program, every kid got an after school program. And so I think on a systems level, if you're a parent, you should be reaching out to your principal and to your government, thinking about like, we need after schools. And not just, there's also the other problem I just have to name with after school itself and summers. Sometimes they're holding spaces. They're enrichment spaces, and they're spaces where they're safe spaces. And that's not enough. We need to be intentional. We need to be creating leaders. We need to be creating thinkers. There's a James Baldwin quote, but the idea is that, and also there's a couple people, but when you really get true education, you start to look at your world with a critical lens, and you start to want to make it a better place and fix those things. And so on a systems level, whoever we're voting into office needs to be working on giving us more money in education and different standards. And I think for our families, we need to be advocating to schools. We need after school, we need summer programming, and it needs to be high quality. And then for corporations, we need to be thinking about, what does it look like to build different spaces? We know that we have a huge STEAM gap. Like, why wouldn't we be investing in schools right now in more innovative, fun, joyful programs that can create the leaders and thinkers to solve the things? Because we think COVID is bad, but it will only get worse. And so it's really important that everyone on every level, community organizations, churches we've partnered with churches before. They have a lot of power. Like, creating these messages and actually creating these programs can be really powerful. And then thinking about the finance behind it. One of the things we do in our big goal with kids is to actually make their models create a level of income for them. I mean, we can get into the capitalistic side of things. We're not trying to go there. But, like, if we can create self-sustaining models where, let's say, kids make their own uniforms, or kids build gardens for the community and they're able to charge for that. Like, thinking systemically, how do we integrate this as a part of what can help us to thrive, I think can be a part of the process. And then one big thing I left out, not telling people or designing for people, co-constructing with them. If I'm going to come into South Central Los Angeles, was where we go, the first thing I'm doing is asking the kids and the parents and the families, what is it that you want to do? And using their voice to construct.
I want you to keep talking about that a little bit and how you created programs. So Change the Tune operates currently in Los Angeles, in the Bahamas, and in Chicago. What was the difference in Chicago?
Chicago is, I mean, each one of our markets is very different on name, but Chicago is focused on real estate, actually. The partner we had there, you know, we exist on the west side. We've been internal at Collins Academy. And, you know, what's the song? Broken Glass everywhere. And, like, you think about, like, the location and a lot of abandoned buildings. And so the vision there's probably the violence rate is probably more. And so thinking about the space that they have and wanting to renovate the space that they have, and the interest of the learners has really been able to shift what it looks like. And then also they were in a maker space, so we were able to design and do some things differently. And so hearing from them, we focus more on like tradition. I wouldn't even say traditional business, but it hasn't been a real estate focus. And in Chicago, it's real estate and also tech. The kids are really interested in tech. And so just thinking about, they have a 3D printer and like, what does a model look like in 3D printing your prototype and robotics and whatnot. And so thinking about, what are kids' gifts? What do they like? And how do we marry those together?
I love that. And also thinking about economically how it's different. I remember, so in LA, we have a 4-week summer camp. But in Chicago, they were like, y'all want us to take 4 weeks off when I'm supposed to be working and saving money from my job? So it had to be a shorter program, and they actually had financial compensation to show up every day.
Yeah, that's another level. Like, each landscape is different, and you have to be able to make sure that you can meet the needs of the community. Like, one of the challenges in after school and summer is that time is valuable. You want me to spend time with you when I could be doing, there's a whole lot of things I could be doing, which include making money. And so, yeah, like, we have to show people why learning is valuable and create a valuable learning experience for them.
How would you address these two questions or perspectives that if, like, hearing you talk about all of these cool things that the programs can involve for after school or in the summer, like, okay, who's paying for all this? How are we paying for all this? And then two, what would you say to, like, well, we need this quality aftercare program, but people saying like, well, why are we putting so much into that after school when the school is messed up during the day, right? Or like, we should, I feel like people would think like, let's put more into the school instead of, it's like, okay, you're going to school all day just so you can actually learn how to learn after school.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. This learn how to learn, like, I think there's a power dynamic between the school day and after school. Like, I think the school day thinks we know how to get kids to learn, although data says otherwise. And I think after school, we look at different evidence collection systems and we do things differently. And so I think there's a lot that the school day can learn from the after school.
I was gonna say, do you feel that you want to get like people into these after school programs and sold on after school so that what happens there is what replaces the school day?
Secretly, yes. I mean,
like, this is a way to throw it in there and test these things, but like, hey guys, this works better.
I think that, unfortunately, again, this point that like schools are they're answering to tests. Like, when people are evaluated at the end of the year, they're looking at their test scores. They don't usually necessarily get like, this is this, but like a principal is the school's test scores. That's what they're held accountable for. That said, and after school, we're looking at things like culture. We're looking at things like social emotional learning skills. We're looking at more holistic elements, attendance. And attendance matters in the school day, but I think that right now it's very one way that school influences after school, and there's not a lot of places where after school influences the school day. And I think if we use them as learning spaces for each other, like, for example, in schools, there are some learning structures that are helpful that after school could learn. And in after school, there are some joy learning structures and some fun and some project-based work that is done. There's a professor of mine, his name Joel Mehta, and he wrote a book. It's called Deeper Learning. And what he did, he went around the country. I don't know, I'm saying the number 50, but like they visited like 50 schools across the country. And what he found was the deeper learning happened outside of traditional school spaces. Lunch, nutrition, in the morning, after school, summer. That's where deeper learning happened because there was more time, there was more space, there was more flexibility for learners to really dig into what mattered to them. And so, yes, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to have that exchange, which is another way we can implode the system to create something new.
But then how do we pay for it?
How do we?
Because already, like, for example, so many teachers you talk about, like they pay for to have school supplies sometimes, or if you want to do something extra, you see that joke where they're like that pizza party at the end of the year, and the slices are mad small, but like those are the things. It's like this is what the kids are looking forward to, but where's the support for that? So how can we support after school?
There's multiple ways. I think one way that we're thinking about is if we turn our after school program into a business itself, then it can generate some level of revenue, and then that can fund a portion of the work. I think secondly, I think the government, going back to the government and how we fund our country and where we allocate our dollars, we need to shift some dollars to after school. If kids are spending 80% of their waking hours outside of school, whatever you're spending in that school day, you need to be now shifting and matching that at the minimum so that we can actually create more equitable spaces. And then the third place I think that is super critical is businesses. Businesses, and actually, I'll get into foundations, sorry. But businesses, again, oil companies, gas companies, these medical companies are making mad money. And but then if we look at 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white. If we look at the top, who's on the boards, who's leading these companies, and then we say we don't have a pipeline. But what if we actually invested right now to make sure that learning was a place and space where kids could sustain themselves and make it to this place, and it wasn't designed for this few? That would be billions, just 5%. If we got all the top 500 companies to give us 5% of their profits, billions we could have. And then the third, I would say, is foundations. So there's this wave around decolonizing wealth. If we think about how this country was formed, slavery, all of the racist practices, this wealth is not some people's. And it's time to, philanthropy is trying to shift, but it's shifting very slowly. The goal of philanthropists, honestly, if you ask me, they all should want to be out of business in the next 20 years. Gates, next 20 years, you should want to get that money out there to the people, because right now we drop breadcrumbs and expect big changes, and we wait to see these traditional metrics of, well, how are the kids' test scores? And we're like, that's not what we're measuring here. And also, just like you look at long-term growth on a stock and that's what matters to the long-term play, then these are long-term plays that you have to invest in, and invest in big right now. And so I think the three top ones, even if we don't put it on the children to make the money, businesses, foundations, and our government should be thinking about shifting how we fund.
Mm-hmm. And it is nice that I see more and more of certain corporations trying to have programs. I'm saying trying because I don't know how awesome they really are, but creating programs and providing money for students or for kids doing stuff after school and things like that, right? Because there's so many Black and brown kids or kids in different communities that they can build things, and they're smart, and they know how to create worlds and metaverses and all these things, but because you test it low, you just kind of fall off, from everybody. And so I do see some investment back into that. The last question I have for you then is just even to our listeners, to any given person, what would you say are some, I hate to say easy, but what are some very digestible things that we could do to support change in education, whether that's supporting programs like Change the Tune, whether that's maybe a way to follow or get involved politically, or what?
I think the first thing is an easy, I'm just going to shameless plug, you can donate to Change the Tune. So $100 a month, if you donate it, would pay for a kid's summer camp. That's $1,200 a year. But $100 a month, we throw away $100 a month on all the things, coffee maybe. But $100 a month, or even if you can't afford that, even $20 a month pays for snacks or a learning kit. And so there are small donations if you have any level of disposable income and you're let me just take a little tweak of my privilege and make sure a kid has a chance for a new learning opportunity. And even if it's not Change the Tune, but if you know of a local after school or summer program that that's doing good work, donate. That's a very simple, you don't have to give your time because we know time is valuable. Moving to time, I think volunteering. At Change the Tune, we take volunteers. Kids love to learn from other people, other meetings. And so is there a local YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, school that you can volunteer? Is there a regular, consistent commitment that you can give up time? And then the third thing is, I think, civics. Who are you voting for? How are we creating petitions, signing petitions, getting our leaders to be able to say we need to shift this? So we're getting ready. One thing I'll say, we're approaching a fiscal cliff. During COVID, we got a lot of money for the after school and education space because of everything shutting down. that money's running out in this next year, basically. And so once that's done, right now, we are still stuck on like, well, how are their test scores doing and what did we invest in these traditional ways? But we haven't learned that that's not okay. Like, this is a long-term bet, and the trauma and things that happen, 3 years did not cover enough. And so just, again, advocating that, like, as we go to the polls, as we go to elections, if you have any political friends, education should be what we're talking about.
No, I think those are amazing. Do you have any, I guess this is probably my last question, any words to people who are like, yeah, it's broken, it doesn't matter anyways, like I could donate, but still nothing's going to change? Like, what would you say to the people who might still be stuck on the negative, like, it's so broken, there's no way we could do anything?
This is the utopian side of me, but this quote came up. You know, I got quotes for days. And I don't know if any of you guys have heard this, but what if the cure for cancer was trapped inside a learner who couldn't afford or have access to a quality education? So, some of the cures, some of the world things have come from one person. So you providing quality access for one person can be transformative for our world. And what if we all just did for one other person? And so, it might feel like a mustard seed, but one of the things we do is gardening. And like, you plant those seeds and you look up and you'll have a wildflower garden. You'll have a garden that you're able to eat from. And so I would say plant the seed. It's going to grow. It's going to grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kemp. I feel like I learned so much, and I work with Change the Tune. So shameless plug again. I work with Change the Tune. We're summer programming. Please donate, come volunteer, come hang out with us, ask questions, and reach out. But we do a shout out every episode. And so this episode, what would you like us to shout out? Where can people find you? How can they support you?
Sure. So on IG at Change the Tune, Facebook, Change the Tune, and our website is changethetune.org. If you want to email me or get in touch with me, my email is Charlie, CHARLI, KEM as in Mary, P as in Paul, at change, there is no the in this one, changetune.org. I'm sure we'll put it and tag it in the document, but please feel free to reach out. Happy to connect, collaborate. We didn't even get to talk about how we partner with so many people and we don't do this work alone, which is part of this. How do you partner and not try to do the work alone? So thank you guys for partnering with me today.
And to speak of partnering, some of the last things you were saying, I like and thought were very important, that you are not just trying to do all of this yourselves, but like you have to get other people invested so that they feel a part of it as well, and so they can actually see the work going on. So we want to thank you for even creating Change the Tune, for caring about the kids, caring about education, and for like reaching out and supporting the people, or so for in our case, it would be like supporting you, and hopefully listeners can support you, but the people who are actually in the work. So like, sure, we might not feel like things can change, and maybe more realistically, just feeling like that's not the most important thing for me to help to see anything quickly, but really like supporting the people who know the numbers, know the quotes, know all the things, have kind of a plan is, how you can easily support, because you don't have to know how to do everything. You just help find people and amplify the people who do. So I'm really glad that we did get to talk with you today. I know Carlie's we've been saying over and over, like, we really need to talk to you. And then, like, if we were having a podcast on education ourselves, we probably would have just been ignorant as hell. So thank you. We'd have been like, so this one blog post said this. But it's so nice to hear somebody who, like, this is your life. So it's very easy for you to explain and to break things down in a way that's very helpful today.
And you mentioned having a deck. So if you want to share any resources, we will also put those in the show notes. So if you feel like this was a catalyst for your change of thought, or you actually just want to see the numbers, numbers, people, numbers are money. So those are important. We will also link that in the show notes. And then I'm going to end with a very Charlie question today. So I'm going to shoot it to you first. We always have a question of the week. Charlie, what song do you feel like today?
I was like, I hope there's an opportunity to say this. Today is April 1st, so wake up. It's the first of the month. Send us some checks so we can go on.
There we go. Man, that means rent is due though. So make sure you pay that rent within the next 2-3 days. I feel like Walking on a Dream, and I think that's Empire of the Sun. Walking on a Dream. It's just like a nice vibey song. I was driving along the highway this morning and just like vibing. So that, and then like a K-Tronada type vibe.
My song's real random. So the first song that's in my head right now is what's that Michael Jackson song? Gotta leave that 9 to 5 up off the shelf and just enjoy yourself. Off the Wall? Is that Off the Wall? I gotta sing the whole song just to remember what the title is. But living off the wall. But mostly today I do gotta do a lot of cleaning and restructuring and think about things. But kind of trying to do that in a fun way. So that's what I'm thinking about.
So thanks again, Dr. Kemp. Y'all hit her. Y'all check out Change the Tune. Hit us with any questions at Carlie's Couch. Let us know what you thought of the episode, what you learned, because I know y'all learned some stuff because she was dropping facts and all kinds of data and statistics. So hit us, let us know, and I hope y'all have a beautiful week.